Coming from a large, faith-filled Ukrainian family, Danylo is the eighth out of 10 children. After discerning out of seminary, he and his brothers started working as touring musicians in the high-energy folk band Scythian. He met his now wife in 2019. They were married this year and are expecting their first child in October. This is a knowHis.love story.
I did grow up in a strong Catholic family of 10 children. But with 10 kids, sometimes kids can fall through the cracks. But I specifically, just my dad never got along with me. I reminded him of himself when he was little, and he just never could be affectionate to me or positive. Really, essentially, he was a great provider, great father. I mean, he worked 2 jobs to make sure that we had a house and music lessons, and I'm a musician for a living, so he paid for all of that. And there's a lot of ways where he demonstrated all of his love, but the interpersonal connection of father and son was pretty much absent in my life, and it was a massive void. And I grew up my mother had a beautiful faith, and she was a very joyful person, and she was God's gift there already to me to make up for that void in my life. And from her, I learned just the beauty of the faith, and kind of a peasant faith, where the Blessed Mother and Jesus felt very real to me. And I had to find myself yearning to be with them or to pray to them or just loving them. But God the Father was just a cloud to me. And I never prayed to him. I didn't know how to pray to him. I do remember at one point when I was 11, just telling God the Father that he was my father because I didn't have a father. After one specific incident, and adopting him as my father, but it kind of ended there. I didn't know how to go any further because I had no concrete evidence of the tenderness of the father. And so I think, right around that point, I remember at a certain point realizing I wanted to be a saint. And I wanted, if I couldn't have the joy that I saw my other siblings have with my dad, or I would at least, help other people. And so I kind of made up for the pain that I was feeling by just trying to be super charitable to people or try to learn about the saints. And what I didn't realize was that I was slowly just beginning to rely on myself to fill the void, the love that I needed so much from the Father. I started to fill that myself, and I think I didn't know this, but subconsciously I was trying to become an amazing person so that my dad would notice me and love me, and I would be the captain of the soccer team, but it never came, and the affirmation that I sought never came. And so I think I transferred that to my spiritual life, and I realized I kind of God the Father needed to break through this. I became a self-made man. I learned what was right. I was trying to live the commandments, but it was very much me doing it on my own, and trying to be good so that God would love me, not because God loved me. And it was a long journey for me. I went to seminary outside of college, and still I would say I had a vibrant faith life. I just never experienced God the Father, and I wasn't aware that I guess it was a heresy called Pelagianism, where we earn our own salvation. And so, because of my relationship with my dad, I was trying to earn my salvation my entire life, because a father's love should be unconditional. But because for whatever reason I didn't have that relationship with my dad, I felt I had to earn it, and that transferred into my spiritual life, and which is pretty much, it basically chokes off any real experience of love, because I'm building the idol, I'm building God in my image, and it was through frequent confession, actually. When I think about how was God reaching me and trying to get me back, because I was already trying to do all the right things. It wasn't like I was a drug addict or found myself, in this terrible situation and I had this, conversion experience. But in a sense, I was the older son in the story of the prodigal son. I was doing everything right, uh, and but my heart was closed to actually experiencing God the way He wanted me to experience Him, which is His unconditional love. And I think I had like 3 or 4 different moments in my life where the priest in confession would just like say like, and when like one priest wasn't even talking to me. It was like, Heavenly Father, how can he understand how much you love him? And I was like talking about something completely different, but I always had this doubt that the Father loves me. It was kind of like, yeah, he brought me into existence and he had to keep me in existence. Kind of like my dad is like, I fathered you and I will provide for you your food and your clothing and your house. But like, I never felt like I want you here and I have a plan for you. And I felt that was transferred to God the Father. It was just more like, yeah, I kind of, created you and I'm going to keep you in existence, but there's no special plan for you. I think because it was such a early wound for me and such a long way of being, trying to be good in order to be loved, and also just not having this awareness. I think there's a certain, like, we become aware of a certain depth within our hearts, but we only have that capability once we're like in our mid-20s, to realize maybe things aren't all perfect. Because the joy of youth is so powerful that you can sometimes not realize that there is a void in your heart. And so I was very dense and very thick-skulled. And so God just had to keep on hitting me over the head with like a 2x4. One specific instance that when it was probably the most intense pain of wondering if God the Father loved me and actually having a dialogue with him, feeling that he turned his back. Like I felt like I started touring as a musician. I felt like I wasn't the guy that I wanted to be anymore because, I was, able to control my environment before I go to daily mass and all the sacraments. But when you're touring, you're around people that don't believe. And there comes a point where you're like, am I crazy? Am I the only person that believes? Because you're in the sea of unbelief in the mainstream, at least. So I just, submitted without telling my band for World Youth Day, Sydney, Australia. The generic submit button. And then I get an email back and say, hey, this is sister, I don't even remember her name anymore, but this is sister, I know Rachel was her name before, but I think I used to play hacky sack with you when you were a teenager when we lived in Austria. I became a Dominican nun here in the States and they transferred me to Australia and now I'm in charge of all the bookings. And I'm going to put you on the main stage for World Youth Day, Sydney. And so I'm like, that's pretty crazy. And so we fly out to Sydney and I'm still like, it was kind of almost crisis mode for me. Like, do you love me? Like, I mean anything to you? Like, I feel like I'm unworthy. I feel like basically that you don't love me anymore because, anytime I would mess up, I feel that my position was in danger. You're not good anymore. And you're not the person, so I won't love you. And it was a very deep wound. It comes, I realized it was totally tied to my relationship with my father. But we did a show like overlooking Sydney Harbor, and we had a rental vehicle. And I was walking back to get it. It was quite a long walk, and so I volunteered, and I'm just like yelling to God. I'm like, do you love me? Like, I feel like you've abandoned me. I feel all alone. And I get into the parking garage. It's 2 a.m. I get in a rental vehicle and I'm like, do you love, I feel like you've abandoned me. And I back up and I hit a car. And because you're on the wrong side over there already. So it's kind of weird. And I was like, it's 2 a.m. This entire parking garage is completely empty, but the only spot was right behind me. So it was like, okay, this proves it. God has completely abandoned me. Like, I am completely alone. And the depths of just kind of confirmation of my worst fear. Just when I hit that car, it was almost like sealed it. Yep, I'm not with you anymore. So I was so tempted to just drive off, but I was like, no. I just wrote a note, left it on the car, said, hey, I'm sorry. I hit your car. Here's my email. I'm only in Australia for 10 more days. I'll pay for the damages. and then I don't hear back um, for like almost 10 days. And then the response I get was, "Dear Dan, first off, I'm really thankful that you left a note. No one would normally do that. The car that you hit is actually a rental car, and I'm a auto body repair mechanic from South Wales, and I was drove up to Sydney the specific class for this week was to repair minor body damage and paint damage. So I ended up using the damage you did as the demonstration for my class. So don't worry about it." And it was like at that moment, like my heart opened up, and it was like a flood. It was such a random thing, and it's almost like God had needed me to go to the depths of feeling that, to kind of break me from holding on to myself as the arbiter of my own goodness. And it was such a clear sign to me that, like, not only do I love you, but I will create the most unique scenario to make sure you don't even have to pay for this damage. And then that's when I started to believe maybe he loves me. Um, and then we went to go play on the main stage, and we had like a 2 p.m. slot, and all of our credentials were screwed up because the person had done such a bad job, they quit because they couldn't handle their. So we were there looking at the main stage, but they wouldn't let us through security. So I was like, well, maybe God, it doesn't love me again. I was starting to doubt, and then um, they all of a sudden said, "Listen, since we screwed up, we're going to have you close out the main stage at World Youth Day after Pope Benedict." So here I am. As soon as you played, you had to leave because of security. But they led us to underneath the stage, and here I am sitting with my nun friend, right? Rachel, and my brother and I, and there's no one between us and Pope Benedict. We're like 50 feet away from Pope Benedict, and he does benediction right there, and I'm just like, the turnaround of, like, they said, "I'm sorry, you missed your set. You came across the world to play on the main stage, but you can't play." And then again, it was taken away, and then it came back. "Oh, by the way, we made it so you can play the last band." So instead of that, we played for 300,000 people after benediction, and the whole arena was just. It was like, that scene at Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings movie when the lightning flashes and you see all the orcs with the flags. That's what it felt like. At one point, they flashed the lights, and there was 300,000 people like dancing to my music. And those two moments were like God showing me, like, I not only love you, but I will give you so much more than you could ever have done if you had done it yourself. And, there was, he's been kind of trying to woo me ever since. I kind of fall back into my own patterns, and then he'll give me this incredible gift. And all my friends and family are like, "I hate you. You get the most crazy things happening to you randomly. And I don't know why it happens to you." And a priest once told me it's because God knows your heart needs to be reminded constantly, because you doubt so much that he loves you. And finally, my spiritual director said, it's like, I wanted to get married. I'd been touring for years, and he said, "You know what? You can't learn to be a father until you first learn to be a son." So my homework for 1 year was just to be a son. And I spent the last year just finally, it's kind of the end of a 20-year journey, just always being like, "Father, be a father to me." I relinquished my control. And it was a control thing too. It was like, I relinquish my control. I will now be your child, and you can give me gifts, and I accept them. And so, it's such a complex journey. There's so many other ways I could mention it, but that pretty much, I would say, would be a kind of a nutshell. It's still something that I'm learning, because I guess the rejection I felt was so deep that I don't know. I don't have an example of what it was, but in the last year, I've met my wife, and we got married, and we're expecting in October. And I have a very strong feeling that God, the minute my child is born, I will know. Like, the way I love that child, I will know that's how I'm loved. I have a devotion to the Infant of Prague, uh, and I used to hate the devotion. It was my mom's favorite devotion, and she passed away from cancer 10 years ago, from breast cancer. And we would just laugh. She had these statues with ruffles, like, and I hated it. It was too girly. But after my mom died, I was volunteering with the Little Sisters of the Poor and the chief beggar for the house, because they feed all the elderly just from begging. And she says, I need you to meet you in my office. And I'm like, okay, I'm a new guy here. Like, why is this nun pulling me into her office? So we sit down and she's like, you need to have a devotion to the Infant of Prague. So I'm sitting there and I just go, I don't like the ruffles. And she said, here's the little booklet, read up on it. And it basically says the reason the Infant of Prague is dressed like a king and he's the king of the world, but his heart towards you is like a child. And that really helped me realize this is the way, a priest told me, if you want to see the heart of the Father, look at a crucifix. He's dying for you. But I couldn't access it that way. And I love little children. So the devotion is, if you need anything materially in life, you say the little novena. And so the sister was telling me all these amazing stories, like she needed $10,000 and someone wrote a $10,000 check right there. Well, basically people say that, like, I call them ruffles, but they say, like, it's not fair. Like, I get such amazing things, like the house that I have now. I was looking for a house, been saving for years, and I looked up at the street and I said, I wish that house would go for sale. And the next day there's a for sale sign. And the guy opens the door and he just says, without a realtor, I just knocked, and he goes, it's Danny. And I had no idea who he was, but we were apparently in the Knights of Columbus together, and I didn't know him. He was like retired already. And I didn't have enough money. I could only offer 30,000 under asking, but I kept on hearing, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I was like, I knew I was supposed to buy a house, and that's why I did it. And they said, you know what, we've been praying. And we felt God has this house reserved for a specific person. And as soon as we opened the door, we knew it was you. So not only are we going to take 35,000 under asking price, but we'll throw in the double lot for free. And then there on the front door, nailed was a cross, and in it said, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so that's just one of many, many instances where it's like you couldn't script it. But I felt so personally loved because they had been praying. They felt it was reserved. I just finished a 30-day novena to St. Joseph, specifically for this reason, to know God's love, and to find my place. Because I know I was baptized. I know I have a vocation, but what is it? Like, I'm a touring musician and I'm successful, but am I a father? Am I supposed to be a priest? I've been in seminary before. And it just kind of like, boom, get the house. 6 weeks later, meet my wife. And it just but it was only as soon as I let go of control of my life and just focused on, I will be your child and I will receive any gift you want to give me. But it was almost, he was waiting for me to relinquish the reins for him to be able to act in my life. And it was a long journey because I didn't know what that would look like. I would say, don't believe the lies that are being sowed right now. You may feel unworthy, unwanted, that there's nothing good about you, or there's nothing to offer. Or you did your best, and things keep on coming up sour for you. And it feels like God the Father is the one that's orchestrating this, that he wants to give you a snake, not a fish. He wants to give you a rock, not a loaf of bread. This is a lie. And when bad things happen, you're tempted to think, like, God, why did you let this happen? Why did you let this happen to me? And, I'm trying my best, but I keep on getting, hit over the head with a 2x4. What's going on? Don't believe that it's the Father. You have a great calling on your life, And the devil is the one that's doing this because he doesn't ever want you to discover the truth about you. He doesn't want you to know. First of all, he doesn't want you to discover that part of your heart, which will do the most damage to Satan's kingdom. So he's coming after that part of your heart. The part where you've been most attacked is your greatest part. The devil, he just, in the parts that are going to cause him damage, he's going to let that go. He's coming after the part of you. So maybe you were told that you don't have a good heart, that you're not a good lover. You don't know how to love well. Maybe you were told that you're stupid or you're ugly, or those are all the parts that Satan wants to destroy in you, because if you could just actually let go and receive the love of the Father, you would do the most damage there, just being who you are. So when those bad things happen, remember that's your great part. And God the Father wants to help you discover that great part. It's not him. He's not the one giving you the snake. He wants to give you the fish. He wants to give you the loaf of bread. But it's a great battle. Your heart is the great battleground, because the glory of God is man fully alive. And the devil wants to make sure you're never fully alive. And he's going to throw everything at you to make sure you never get there. And he's going to throw dust in your eyes, so you're confusing bad things as coming from God as opposed to coming from Satan. And you have a good heart. And if you can just relinquish control, don't build yourself into your own image, but let go and just take your broken heart and put it at the feet of the Father. And you know what? You're probably going to hear radio silence, but it's in the silence that the Holy Spirit works. It's in the whisper, not in the earthquake. And you know what? Sometimes I used to say this for years. I am a broken car. You're the mechanic. I can't do anything. I'm just going to park myself here and you do it. You do the open heart surgery. I'm going to be underneath. I'm going to be anesthetized. But I trust that you know my heart better than me. And hold on, like Jacob wrestling God in the desert. Just don't be stubborn about it. And he had to break Jacob's hip because he was doing it his way. But don't ever let go, but let God do it his way. And just trust that God, the Father, has a plan for you. And now more than ever, anybody that wants to give their hearts to him, he wants to make sure that Satan wants to make sure that they never discover that heart. So it's an all-out war. And where you feel your pain, it's your greatness.
Thank you for listening to Danylo's story. I would love to share your story as well. Please let us know and connect with us on social media or by clicking on the Join Us link at knowHis.love.